Greetings, welcome, spiritual warriors. We meet again. I missed you, but I had a wonderful time for Radhastami. I pray all of you had a wonderful day and are renewing our relationship with Radharani. I had a wonderful experience that morning in the temple. I just wanted to share. I sit in the back and just watch all the activity and the bhajan singing and Radharani and Shina Sundar is so beautiful. And what came to my mind, I felt this is the spiritual world. And I felt that way that if most people walking outside or down the road came in, they wouldn't know what was going on. And yet there we were, so happy and so joyful. And it was just really a real sense of love and connectedness and a sense of being very fortunate that in this lifetime I have been fortunate enough to get this understanding, this knowledge, this association. So that was my happy Radhastami. So here we are, spiritual warriors. We're studying from Bhakti Tirtha Swami's Spiritual Warrior books. We've done chapters, sections from 2, Spiritual Warrior 2, Spiritual Warrior 3, Spiritual Warrior 4, and we're now on Spiritual Warrior 5. We just completed the chapter on inner dialogue. And if you've been following us, you were given wonderful exercises to get us in touch with yourself and your inner dialogue and what's happening in your life with it. And I hope you've been using it, practicing it. But I'm not going to ask you to write in and tell me your results. I kind of sometimes wish it was an open classroom so I could pick on you and say, what happened with you? But it's all right. I've learned with this teaching and philosophy, it's not to be concerned about the results. It's what I'm offering to you in order to serve my Guru and Krishna. So we're beginning tonight, Spiritual Warrior 5, making the mind your best friend. We're doing chapter 2, the importance of short-term goals. And I'm sure all listening that setting goals, oh my gosh, where are you going with that? Let's see what His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami helps us with now. He begins with a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 18, which states, all these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me, I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. And I hope everyone is familiar with the Bhagavad Gita by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to be reading something from there tonight. But if you are familiar or not, we know that the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Krishna, the Lord Himself, over 5,000 years ago. And it gives us wonderful instructions. So, Bhakti Tirtha Swami starts the first section, a gradual progression towards the goal. Although we understand that a devotee ultimately wants to return to the spiritual world as an unalloyed servant of Krishna or God, we should also consider the importance of short-term goals as we gradually progress towards our ultimate goal. And what is our ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is love of God and returning to the spiritual world. He gave us that in the very first section. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Lord tells us the ultimate goal, which entails always thinking of Him. He says, engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. And I hope you've been following. If you're new or first time, that's all right. These books by Bhakti Tirtha Swami, the whole concept he's giving us, the idea is for us to become grounded in knowing who we are as spiritual beings, eternal beings, a spirit soul. He goes on, the Lord directly tells us the ultimate goal of our existence. Remember the eternal question that's still going on, who am I, where am I going, what is the purpose of life? If we study these teachings, we'll get the answer. If we desire deep within our heart to know, we will get the answer. And he tells us to always think of Him, never forget Him, and act in a way that will please Him. Ultimately, the eternally liberated entities whose thoughts always remain perfectly aligned with God occupy this elevated position. Now, of course, it says next, almost most entities do not function on this particular level. So although most of us do not function on that level, the Supreme Lord does not reject us, considering them or us to be hopeless failures. Instead, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord provides various alternatives for devotees who cannot always think of Him. I spent some time today reading, going back to that 12th chapter. It's a short chapter and very, very sweet. So if you have Bhagavad Gita, this is a wonderful time for reviewing or taking it out, blowing the dust off, and getting, again, closer. Because as we're talking about the Lord in this way, we need to know, we must know who He is and what our relationship is with Him. That's the knowledge. We have that knowledge, then we can understand what this goal we're talking about, this ultimate goal that we're talking about. So in that 12th chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord, He first recommends the process of sadhana bhakti, or devotional service, in practice. Now I'm going to stop there and read something from Bhagavad Gita on devotional service. And if you're out there, you probably know devotional service. When we speak of that, we're talking about serving the Lord with loving devotion, because that's why we're here. Again, back to knowing who we are and what our position is, that we are servants. We are servants of the Lord. And a servant serves the master. Of course, most of us, we want to be the masters and the controllers, and that's our problem, why we're suffering. But where he states of this devotional service in practice, and in chapter 12, text 9, the verse states, "O my Arjuna, O winner of wealth, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. In this way, develop a desire to attain me. So, you see what's happening as we're reading this. We have to watch the mind. It is not saying, how are you going to do that? What is she talking about? What's he talking about? What you're hearing, and the hearing is very important. And you're being given a process, a progressive process, to get to the ultimate goal, which we said is love of God and returning to the spiritual world. And this loving God, supreme, he knows how the mind works, he knows how we are, so he gives us alternatives. And here he's saying, if you can't fix your mind, then you follow regulative principles in Bhakti Yoga, which is devotional service. Yoga to link, Bhakti to serve, linking back to God through service. And develop a desire to attain me. The desire has to be there. And if you're doing this, that desire will arise, and you want to know more about God and get closer to God. Srila Prabhupada helps us out with this verse by just saying to practice the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. One should, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, follow certain principles. One should rise early in the morning. That's not bad if the weather isn't too cold. But it's worthwhile even if it's cold. Take bath, enter the temple, offer prayers, and chant Hare Krishna. Collect flowers and offer to the deity. Cook foodstuffs to offer to the deity. Take prasadam, and so on. Now these are the regulative principles and regulations to practice. He says there are various rules and regulations which one should follow. And one should constantly hear Bhagavad Gita. Now, and Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's not difficult these days, is it? With the iPods and the Wii's and I don't know what else is out there. And the computer now, you can go in and, download and stick a little thing in your ear and something in your pocket, and you're hearing. And it's that hearing that develops the desire. And as the desire arises, then the practice begins. And we're going to hear more about practice in a few minutes. So Srila Prabhupada says this practice can help anyone rise to the level of love of God. And then he is sure of his progress into the spiritual kingdom of God. So this is what we're talking about, devotional service. Bhakti Tirtha Swami goes on. We should engage in activities that will absorb the senses and mind in thoughts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the 9 processes of devotional service. And they're listed as hearing and chanting about the transcendental holy name, form, qualities, paraphernalia, and pastime of Lord Vishnu, remembering them, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, offering the Lord respectful worship with 16 types of paraphernalia, offering prayers to the Lord, becoming his servant, considering the Lord's one's best friend, and surrendering everything unto him. In other words, serving him with the body, mind, and words. These 9 processes are accepted as pure devotional service. And when I read that, I believe it's in the Bible. One of the commandments that Jesus gives is what? Love God with your whole mind, your whole body, and with your words. So what we're reading is not new. It's from ancient times, and it's carried through in other scriptures. That was from Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 5, Text 23. Goes on. However, God knows that many souls cannot even practice these tenets of bhakti. Therefore, what does he do? Therefore, he tells us to work for him or help those who always follow the process of sadhana bhakti. We should facilitate those who can follow the process by working for the Lord as a team player. So you're not out there by yourself struggling, trying to find your way. If you have a spiritual master, you're getting the help from him. If you haven't as yet, then you are with those who are also endeavoring to practice. Even if we cannot work for God or help the practicing devotee, God still does not turn us away or consider us hopeless. Rather, he tells us to do our own work to the best of our ability while remaining detached from the results. That's when I mentioned, when I started this today, about not asking you all questions or how you did with some of the techniques, technologies, and then waiting for something to come up in the chat room and it doesn't. I've learned it's not, this is what remaining detached from the results. At the present, I'm endeavoring to do the best of my ability to offer these techniques, technologies, and words of His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami that have impressed on my life, and I'm endeavoring to practice them, and I'm offering them, and if I don't get a response on the chat room, it's fine, I'm learning. So it's a growing process. It's a growing process, and if we use every experience for our growth. So, however, many people will even consider the last recommendation impossible or not want to follow due to the nature of their desires. Therefore, Krishna tells them to acquire knowledge. Please, if you have a Bhagavad Gita, do read this chapter 12. This is where this is coming from. God Himself gives us alternatives, because although He ultimately tells us to think of Him, He understands that we may not be ready to fully absorb our minds on Him. What a loving, caring God. Again, I want to just go back to Bhagavad Gita, where again He gives us these alternatives. He says to Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, he who engages in my pure devotional service, free from the contaminations of fruitive activities and mental speculations, he who works for me, who makes me the supreme goal of his life, and who is friendly to every living being, he certainly comes to me. Isn't that wonderful? The Lord Himself is telling you how to come to Him, step by step by step. And you have the alternatives. Bhakti Tirtha Swami goes on. Constant meditation on God means that we will worship Him in full absorption and allow Him to work through us. And just think about that. Worship with full absorption. What song have you heard recently out there? I don't know, because I don't listen to radio, turn on TV. But at some point, you find yourself humming it and what have you. And then maybe you may stop and listen to the words and you say, what am I doing with this? Or you may bought a new car. I have my next door neighbor. They recently got a new car. It's another car, not brand new. But anyway, it looks nice. And sometimes I sit out in the morning chanting. And he'll come out and go to his car and look on the side and look around. And it came to me one morning, he's paying his obeisances to his car. And we speak, and he sees me chanting, and sometimes I'll just say, have you chanted yet this morning? Because we do. When we become absorbed in anything, we think about it. We pay attention to it. And more or less, if you will, worship it. And this is what we're being offered here to help us in our everyday life and to deal with what's going on in this material crazy world. So meditation on God, constant meditation on God, means that we will worship Him in full absorption and allow Him to work through us. And it came to me when I first started with this, that's not a difficult thing to do, constant meditation on God, if you're hearing about Him, if you're reading the scriptures, because there's so many pastimes about God and His activity that you can just pull up one and think about Him. So he says, at this stage, this is when one is constantly meditating, we will be fully in touch with the Lord due to the absence of false ego, which manifests as fear, anger, envy, lust, greed, intoxication, madness, etc. And what are they called? Remember what we read when we were in Spiritual Warrior 4? Those are the enemies of the mind. And we learned some things about some of those enemies when we were in Spiritual Warrior 4, but he gave us techniques and technologies to move through them. And here we're being reminded that constant meditation on the Lord means we'll worship Him. And if we're fully absorbed in that, then He works through us. Because, as it says here, He's our very dear friend, our very best friend. And as we just read from Bhagavad Gita, He says, surely you'll come to me if you follow these regulations. So the enemies of the mind will no longer attack us, because we will always be in rapt meditation on God. All of these areas drag the mind away from the Lord because they pull it in other directions. And I just want to add this, what he's not saying here, that you just sit and meditate, and think you're going back home. You have to work. And the Lord is telling you to do your own work. Because we're in the material world, we have to work even to maintain. But it's what mindset you're using as you work. If you know that this God, your best friend, He's created everything comes from Him. His energy is in everything. Then you can still do your work, but you are meditating on Him, and then He can work through you. As you're doing what you need to do. All these areas. Therefore, if we do not have the full ability to present our minds to God and receive Him in full, He gives us ways in which we can still gradually move towards Him and remain under His general care. And he's going to quote again from Bhagavad Gita. And I just want to again say, if you've got one, get it out and go through some of these texts that we're reading. If you don't have one, you can read it online, Krishna.com. You can go there. Bhagavad Gita online. One morning I forgot what I was doing, and I went to Krishna.com to do something, and I decided, let me listen to the Bhagavad Gita. It was wonderful hearing it, So if you don't have one on your bookshelf, you can go and hear it. If you want one on your bookshelf, Krishna.com store. Okay, it's wonderful hearing from the Lord. Now this quote, he says in 4:11, chapter 4, "As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of prophet." So whether we think of the Lord fully, engage in other processes, or simply resort to atheism or impersonalism, we still remain on the Lord's path, and He reciprocates with us according to our thoughts and action. We do not want to think myopically by categorizing a person who cannot work exclusively for God as a failure. So we always have a choice, don't we? The next section is called Practice Makes Perfect. Now he goes on, if we look at athletes who participate in the Olympic Games, and a lot of folks watch those things. I just see the headlines when I turn on the news on the computer. We all see that many of them have had intense goals for a long period of time. Many of them even began training as small children in order to excel in a particular discipline later on in life. It is rare for a person to spontaneously decide overnight to excel in a field and develop proficiency through the process of osmosis. In most cases, a person must have serious determination to reach a goal and must practice intensely. Sometimes these athletes have to practice every day for hours and hours. Their entire lives revolve around that particular activity. Although they may have other pursuits on the side, the sport constantly remains the major priority, and they even center their diet, friends, and their work upon swimming, track, skating, whatever, in order to one day win the gold medal in the Olympics. These athletes need to regularly set short-term goals, which will carry them to their ultimate goal. Okay, follow this. This chapter is called The Importance of Short-Term Goals. And we have talked about getting to the ultimate goal. So he gives this example. It's one we can all relate to and think. Now he says, try to understand this point. If we just have long-term goals without any type of strategy or short-term goals, in most cases, our ultimate goal will remain theoretical. We require intense meditation and strategies that can help us move from one success to another until we finally reach the ultimate achievement. Okay? Strategies to move from one success to another. In the Mahabharata epic, why did Arjuna succeed in shooting the eye of a fish? Many powerful Shastras or warriors tried to pass this test in order to win Draupadi as their wife, but only Arjuna could meet the challenge. Due to his intense training and ability to focus, he could reach that ultimate goal without any problem. His intense practice and gradual progression through specific short-term goals help him attain a deep level of expertise. Don't know if you know that story of all of these were Kshatriyas, and they all were trained by the best teacher in shooting bow and arrow. And the king wanted the best man for his daughter, if I remember, Draupadi. So they each came up, and he said, anyone that can shoot that bird up there through the eye can win her hand. And each one, as they come up, he said, what do you see? And they would describe, I see the branch, I see the leaves, I see the bird, I see his beak at the... He said, when he got to Arjuna, what do you see? And Arjuna said, I see his eye. Go ahead. And he shot, and of course, right, because he was focused. And he had been practicing how to focus. So that practice is important. A ship without a rudder. Now, although we see ourselves as worshippers of God and ultimately want to become fully God conscious, the mind is very strong. Remember, we did the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior. And what was the first one? Sense control and mastery of the mind. And we went through quite a few points there about that mind. If we do not sufficiently plan, Maya, Satan, or the temptation will plan for us. If we do not plan every day with short-term goals, it will become very hard to reach the ultimate goal. There's an African proverb that states, if you do not know where you're going, any road will do. Even parents try to give their children certain goals that can guide them through their lives. Unfortunately, due to the increasing difficulties involved in child rearing these days, some parents simply allow their children to act as they please. It's interesting, when I read this, I agree. I have a phrase, somebody heard me say it the other day. I just don't understand raising children these days. I don't understand parents in raising their children today. A lot of changes. The current educational system also tends to teach in this way by allowing the children to somewhat learn on their own. However, sending our children out into the world without some strategy or basic structure is comparable to sending a ship out to sea without its rudder. There has to be training, there has to be discipline. Under these circumstances, we will just send them away with a feeble hope that they will somehow gain some momentum. If we send them out without any facility, they can easily get stuck. So as parents, we have quite a responsibility for our children and for ourselves in helping our children. Obviously, the parents should recognize their children's individuality and try to inspire them according to their particular propensities, because children will simply rebel if the parents try to force them to think, walk, or talk in a certain way at every single moment. However, if we send the children out into the world and allow them to act solely on their own feelings, not only will they end up like a ship without a rudder, but ultimately they will turn into obnoxious entities who even hate their parents for giving them that so-called freedom. They may later characterize that leniency as a lack of love or care, since the parents have not used their resources to plan for their future. Again, you're getting a sense that parenting, it's quite a responsibility. So, are there any questions or comments up to this point before we go into a means to reach the end? No questions. Okay. A means to meet the end, to reach the end. The children or young members of spiritual societies hear year after year that our ultimate goal is to become pure devotees of the Lord. At the same time, they see so many deviation as well as sense gratification around them and feel bored by this ultimate goal that seems so far away and ambiguous. However, if some of these children have short-term goals that can absorb their energies, they will feel much more comfortable as they pass year after year in the devotional culture while simultaneously trying to embrace the ultimate goal. They need to feel some excitement, adventure, and achievement that can carry them throughout their lives. And that comes from the parents' environment, practicing devotional service. Having the children in the morning, if you worship at home, do the worship with you at home, or take them to the temple. Let them hear about the Lord. Let them hear about how He helps His devotees. Let them even become mindful of how the Lord takes care of them or is protecting them or has helped them in some situation. And the excitement that what they're studying and hearing is really an important part of their lives. So it has to come from example. He goes on, I am passionately addressing this topic because I see what is happening in many environments and what is happening to myself, he says. When I look back over the years, I understand that my spiritual mentor's mercy has kept me serving enthusiastically year after year. But I can also see how my short-term goals have played an important role. We constantly hear the word surrender. But surrender is a process. Sometimes people tell us, just do your duty. However, Dharma or religious duty is also based on capacity. or adhikar. We cannot impose Dharma, religion, on people, but must inspire people to live by Dharma. So we must be the example. We must live it. You can't take somebody where in mind or consciousness where you haven't been yourself and understand. So we have to be the example. By honoring Dharma, we position ourselves to naturally embrace Sanatana Dharma, or our eternal duty. Because Sanatana Dharma means the eternal activity of the soul. And that comes about by rendering service to the Supreme, because that's the service duty of the soul, to serve the Lord, and the soul is within. So we serve the Lord. If you just serve out of duty without any sense of excitement, gradually our life will become a disappointment, and you will also consider yourself to be a disappointment to those who care for you most. Just reading that, your life will become, if you just serve out of duty without a sense of excitement. I remember when I first came to this teaching, this philosophy, we were at the Institute for Applied Spiritual Technology with His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. But as I started reading Bhagavad Gita and hearing, and going to class every morning and hearing, and doing some service. I remember I used to change the water in Bhakti Tirtha Swami's flower vases, and there's also the vases for the deity. But it just seemed, everything was so exciting that the more service I was doing, the more I wanted to do, and it was just such an exciting, fulfilling feeling of being able to do. Now, of course, what happened with me as I became more into the aging process, which happens to all of us and will happen to us because that's a part of the process, I was not able to physically do so much, up the stairs, across the room, and the whole thing. And I began to feel some disappointment in myself for not being able to do so much. And I remember I actually went to Bhakti Tirtha Swami, my spiritual master, with almost tears in my eyes that, I can't get upstairs to do this. And he said to me, it's not the doing, it's what's in your heart and your desire, and you do the best you can. And that sort of calmed me down. And what he did to help, and this is the spiritual master, when I was at the Institute House, he would bring down the vases. And I would, freshen up the flowers and clean the vases and all, and then somebody would take them up. So he understood, and he was helping me to understand, again, the process. And it's always, so now, even as I'm progressing more in this aging process, I'm understanding that hearing and chanting is also devotional service. We read earlier the 9 processes. But when you're able, there needs to be excitement in what you're doing, because you are doing something to please the Lord. And in that pleasing, as he said, is all surrender to me. I reciprocate. And that means we're reaching the goal. One way or the other, we're always crazy. Either we're crazy and intoxicated by love of God, or we're just crazy about some type of sense gratification. It's just a matter of how we direct that intense craziness. We're in the material world. It's a crazy place. As we develop a passion for certain goals according to our propensities, we will even begin to energize each other about our own particular concerns and interests. Conversely, if we just act mechanically or even grudgingly on a day-to-day basis, we will also begin to weaken the people around us, because that lack of enthusiasm will gradually seep into everyone's consciousness and weaken our desire to honor particular goals. Have you ever been excited about something you're doing or making or painting or something, and you go, to your friends or some friends, and look at what I've done. And somebody said, oh, that's nice. And some say, well, I don't understand. What's that? Why it look like that? By the time they get through, you look at it yourself and say, what am I doing? So we have to be careful that we must not do it mechanically. Know that whatever we're doing, as servants of the Lord, we're doing it to please Him. He goes on. For this reason, sometimes in the Olympic Games, members of the same country will win the gold, silver, and bronze medal in one particular sport. Since the gold medalist practiced the sport with such passion, his or her enthusiasm raised the standard of other athletes. Therefore, they have a whole team of powerful achievers due to a single person who could encourage others to reach higher levels of excellence through his or her own example. So we don't let anybody stop our show. If we know what we're doing is to serve and help others, we don't let a few say, what you doing? You keep going. And that'll encourage others to keep going. If we only hear about the higher goals, but do not have a strategy to reach that end, we will become almost like a cult. Since we will not have reached the higher goal, we will feel intimidated, and we may even pretend that we have reached that point. Consequently, we will have people who desire to act or serve in their own way, but will avoid these short-term goals, since they do not want to seem independent. People might say, oh, you're just in Maya or illusion. Don't try to be so independent, just work. However, we do have certain abilities and tendencies that we can use in the service of Guru, God, and the community. We should, if possible, engage in activities that are more suited to our nature, which is not Maya, especially if we're following that ninefold process. The Lord Himself gives us alternative ways to progress, even if we cannot always think of Him. He gives us bona fide short-term goals. We do not want to connect with inauthentic short-term goals or ultimate goals, nor do we want to minimize the dynamic nature of Krishna consciousness. God is always active, and as we find ways to harness our minds and ways to serve Him, our appreciation for the Lord will increase. So think about what short-term goal. Where are you? I think we read in when we were studying the enemies of the mind. But really, see where you are on the spiritual path, because this is what spiritual warriorship is about. For you to recognize who you are as a spiritual, eternal being, and to work with that to see where you are on the path, what are obstacles to reach your goal, and set smaller goals. Maybe you haven't been reading your scripture for a while, and you've gotten caught up in the newspapers or other magazines, which sometimes out of curiosity we want to see what's going. But have you been reading your scripture? Just a verse a day. My spiritual master had said, read 1 hour every day. I started out very good with that at one point, but I fell off a little. But just take time. That's a short-term goal. Each day I will read one verse from Bhagavad Gita. And then another short-term goal may be, and I will share it with my friend. And then let that excitement of hearing about the Lord. So I'm going to stop here. We have quite a bit more to go, but think about your goals, your short-term goals. Where are you on this path? You know what your desire is and what your spiritual life means to you. Think about that. Write about it. We've been through a number of techniques, technologies. How are you doing with managing your anger? We spent quite a bit of time. And are you balancing excessive anxiety? We've covered quite a bit to bring us to this point that we are desiring more for the ultimate goal and more connection with the Lord. So, are there any questions or comments for tonight? Nothing. Okay. Anybody out there? Okay. Anybody want to say Harry Bo, where you are? No? Okay. Then I'll say Harry Bo to all of you. Thank you for being there. I pray you've gotten something to work with this week. And we'll be back next week working with the importance of short-term goals. And the title of the first part we'll start is Evaluate the Goal. So if you've had any goals in mind, or you're thinking more seriously about goals after tonight, maybe write them down. And we'll see where we go with this, and you can work more on becoming, what are we into? Spiritual warriorship. Thank you for being here. Hare Krishna. Bye-bye.